What's up, everyone? Farid here. Welcome back to the channel. So let's talk about the big three. You've probably heard Judaism, Christianity, and Islam called the Abrahamic faiths, right? It's the standard label you see everywhere, from textbooks to documentaries. The story we're usually told is that they're like three cousins at an awkward family reunion. They might argue over who got the best inheritance, and they definitely don't agree on how the family stories are supposed to end. But deep down, they're family. They share some history, they have some of the same characters in their photo albums, and they all supposedly trace back to the same spiritual ancestor. They all start from the same basic premise: a world built by a single, all-powerful divine being. Humans are the special project, crafted with intention. It's a powerful and very popular idea. And on the surface, this family explanation seems to make sense. It's neat, it's tidy. It explains why they share so much DNA while still being so different. But what if that's not the real story? What if the family resemblance isn't just a resemblance at all? What if it's something much, much stranger? But what if I told you it's less family reunion and more creative plagiarism? Look, I'm not talking about a few shared traditions or liking the same kind of food. We're talking about something far more fundamental. When you actually open up the books, you find that the most important, world-defining stories aren't just similar, they're practically identical in their structure. It's like they're all working from the same secret blueprint. Take the creation myth. All three have it. The details get a little theological spin, Christianity adds a heavy emphasis on original sin, Islam downplays it, but the core narrative is a copy-paste job. Or the Great Flood. In the Hebrew Bible, it's Noah. In Christianity, it's Noah again, just with some extra moral allegory layered on top. In Islam, the character Nuh is the hero, warning his people and saving the day. Three different books, same story, same hero. It's the same with the patriarchs and prophets. The Abraham character, the Moses character, they show up in all three stories. It's like watching three different TV shows and realizing they all have the exact same cast, just wearing slightly different costumes. The source text I'm working from puts it perfectly. It's the same skeleton dressed in different clothes. Or to put it in today's terms, it's the same operating system, just with a different user interface. Judaism is the command line original, Christianity adds GUI with lots of icons, and Islam releases the sleek, streamlined mobile version. But under the hood, they're running the same source code. And that raises a massive question. If everyone is copying from the same blueprint, where did the blueprint itself come from? Therefore, if we want to understand this shared source code, we have to start at the beginning. I'm talking about the foundational myths, the big ones, the stories everyone knows even if they've never opened a holy book. Creation and the Great Flood. People think of these as biblical originals, the bedrock of everything that follows. But here's what's crucial to understand. The ancient world wasn't a series of isolated bubbles. It was a bustling, messy, interconnected neighborhood. Think of it like a cultural soup. People were trading goods, fighting wars, and most importantly, sharing stories. What we call sacred scripture today didn't just appear out of thin air. It emerged from this pool of floating oral tales that have been circulating for centuries. Let's take the most famous example, the story of Noah and the Big Flood. It's iconic. A righteous man, a divine warning, an ark full of animals, and a world washed clean. The thing is, it's not original, not even close. Meet the Epic of Gilgamesh, a Mesopotamian epic poem written centuries before the biblical account. And guess what story it contains? A man named Utnapishtim is warned by a god to build a massive boat to save himself, his family, and the seeds of all living things from a world-destroying flood sent by angry deities. It's all there. The boat, the animals, the flood, even sending out birds to check for dry land. The parallels are so exact and so numerous that there's no debate among scholars of the region. The biblical story is a later adaptation of a much older myth. This isn't divine revelation. It's a culture absorbing the popular myths of its time. Like a new band covering a hit song, and then generations later, their fans believe they wrote it. This is the foundation of the blueprint. stories borrowed from the neighbors. So now we know where the raw material comes from. But what happens to a story when you borrow it? You don't just leave it as is, you change it. You edit it to fit your own agenda. So, the foundation of the blueprint wasn't delivered from on high, it was borrowed from the neighbors. But what happens to a story when you borrow it? You don't just leave it as is, especially if you want to build a new community around it. You change it. You edit it to fit your own agenda. And for the perfect case study in this, we have to look at the character who's supposed to be the great unifier of all three religions, Abraham, or Ibrahim. On the surface, everyone claims him. He's the founding father, the patriarch. Therefore, you'd think his story would be the one place where everyone agrees. But when you look at the fine print, you find the most important political edit in the entire blueprint. It's all about his kids. The story goes that Abraham has two famous sons, Isaac and Ishmael. And this is where you get the first major fork in the code. According to the Jewish and Christian traditions, the divine promise, the covenant, is passed down through Isaac. He's the chosen heir. But when Islam comes along, the story gets a crucial rewrite. It claims that the promise and the holy lineage flow through the other son, Ishmael. This isn't a friendly disagreement over theology. This is a fight over a story to claim legitimacy. When you peel back the dogma, what you see is three groups fighting over the inheritance rights to a myth they all share. It's a divine custody battle for God's approval. And if you want proof that this was a deliberate edit, look no further than the story of Abraham's ultimate test of faith, the near sacrifice of his son. In the Judeo-Christian version, the son on the altar is Isaac. In the Islamic version, it's Ishmael. The moral of the story is the same, absolute obedience to God, but the main character changes depending on which group wants to claim that they are the true heirs of the divine promise. Now ask yourself a simple question. If one God was the author of this story, would he be so sloppy as to get the name of the son wrong? Or is it just a little more likely that human storytellers tweaked the details to make sure their group came out on top? So these borrowed stories get edited for political gain. Therefore, you need a way to keep your newly defined group in line. You need rules. And for that, you need a lawgiver. So, stories are borrowed, then they're edited for political gain. Therefore, these edited stories need a set of rules to hold the new group together, to make them feel distinct. Every good club needs a rulebook. And for that part of the blueprint, you need a lawgiver. Enter the Moses archetype. In Judaism, the character Moses comes down from Mount Sinai with the law etched in stone. In Islam, the character Musa confronts Pharaoh and receives revelation. Christianity keeps the Moses figure, but reframes his law as a kind of prequel, the old software that needed an update. The myth is always the same. One special guy gets direct instructions from the divine CEO. He comes down from the mountain with the official company handbook. But here's where it gets really messy. If one God is writing the rules, you'd expect them to be consistent, right? You'd think the corporate policy would be the same across all branches. Well, let's check the fine print. Okay, topic 1, pork. What's the rule? That is a mess. Okay, next. How do you get saved or achieve salvation? 3 different answers. They can't even agree on the most important goal of the entire system. It's chaos. And it's not just in the fine print, it's the headline rules. And you know, the idea of a god handing down a law code to a king or prophet wasn't even new. This is the code of Hammurabi from Babylon, centuries older than the Moses story. And what does it depict right at the top? The sun god Shamash giving the laws to King Hammurabi. It was a standard political move in the ancient world. You claim your laws come directly from a god to make them sound absolute and unquestionable.
So when you look at all these contradictions, it becomes obvious. To borrow a fantastic line from my source text for this video, these are not the fingerprints of a single divine mind. They are the messy seams of human editing. Different communities were just tweaking the terms and conditions to carve out their own brand identity. So let's recap. We have borrowed foundations, political edits, and contradictory rules. When you put all of that together, what does it start to look like? Therefore, the only model that really makes sense isn't three separate religions. It's a mythological franchise. Think about it like a Hollywood movie series. First, you have Judaism. That's the original classic film. It established the entire universe, the lore, and the core cast of characters. It was a huge hit in its regional market. Then, a few centuries later, you get Christianity. This is the big budget reboot. It takes the original scripture and says, hey, you know all those beloved characters and stories? They were actually just one long teaser trailer pointing to our new main character. It keeps the old cast, but insists that they're all supporting characters for the new star. And then, a few more centuries later, Islam is released. This is the final installment, the director's cut. It comes along and says, look, those first two versions were great, but the studios, or, the rabbis and priests, corrupted the original vision. This is the final restored version of the story, correcting all the previous errors and sealing the franchise for good. It's the same creative universe, just with different marketing. And the proof is that they keep recycling the cast. Adam, Noah, Abraham, Moses, David, Solomon, they all get roles in every single movie. They're the familiar faces the audience expects to see. Even the Jesus character shows up in the third film as Isa, still born of a virgin, still a miracle worker, but with a different backstory and a major plot twist where he isn't crucified. It's like bringing a character back from the dead for a sequel, except here they're claiming he never died in the first place. This isn't evidence of divine continuity. As the source text points out, it's mythological recycling. It's storytellers in every culture reworking familiar heroes rather than inventing new ones from scratch. And each new installment has to claim it's the most important one. That's not revelation, that's just good marketing. So we have our model, it's a franchise. But that leads to the biggest question of all. Why? Why does this blueprint work so well? Why not just write new stories? Why are we, as a species, so magnetically drawn to these recycled myths generation after generation? So we have our model, it's a franchise, a recycled blueprint of stories, characters, and laws repackaged for new audiences over centuries. But that leads to the biggest question of all. Why? Why does this blueprint work so well? Why not just write new stories? Why are we as a species so magnetically drawn to these recycled myths generation after generation? Therefore, to answer that, we have to look at what these myths actually do for us. Because they aren't just stories, they are powerful pieces of psychological technology. First, they provide answers to the big, scary, unanswerable questions. In a world without science, myth was the only tool available to make sense of the chaos. A story, even a borrowed one, that explains why the rains failed or why people get sick provides a powerful sense of order and control. Second, these stories create an us. A shared myth is the ultimate team-building exercise. It draws a line between who's in the group and who's out. When you're all part of the same epic story, the chosen people, the ones who are saved, it binds you together in a way that nothing else can. It's the foundation of tribalism. And third, and maybe most importantly, these stories give our lives cosmic meaning. We crave narrative continuity. We want to feel like we're part of something bigger than our own short, fleeting lives. By linking yourself to this ancient chain of characters, Adam, Noah, Abraham, your existence suddenly isn't random anymore. You're a character in the grandest story ever told. That's a powerful, powerful feeling. So you see, it's not about truth, it's about function. These stories are tools for survival. They unite groups, they justify laws and power structures, they comfort us in the face of the unknown, and they keep people in line with the promise of future reward and the threat of future punishment. Myths aren't powerful because they're true. They are powerful because they are useful. And that's the real secret to why this blueprint has been so successful for so long. It's not a divine plan. It's a human one, designed to meet our deepest psychological needs. So
The blueprint is a human invention designed to meet human needs. Therefore, what's the big takeaway from all of this? What do we do now that we can see the machinery behind the curtain? So, the blueprint is a human invention, a powerful psychological tool designed to meet our deepest needs for order, meaning, and community. Therefore, what's the big takeaway from all of this? What do we do now that we can see the machinery behind the curtain? Well, for starters, we can see these religions for what they are. Not three separate divine revelations, but three branches of the same human storytelling tradition. They're variations on a theme, from creation and the flood to the patriarchs, prophets, laws, and miracles. It's all recycled, reshaped, and repurposed. If these stories truly came from a single all-knowing God, you'd expect clarity and consistency. Instead, we find the opposite: contradictions, cultural fingerprints, and constant revisions that just so happen to serve the political and social needs of the group telling the story. When Judaism, Christianity, and Islam argue over who has the real truth, it's like siblings fighting over who owns the family stories. But the evidence shows the stories themselves go back much further than any of them, to the older myths of Mesopotamia and the earliest human attempts to make sense of a chaotic world. The chain doesn't lead to heaven, it leads right back to us. Recognizing this isn't about tearing anything down. It's about seeing clearly. It's a tool for critical thinking. Once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. And that's a good thing. It frees you from the pressure of having to believe that one specific, edited version of a borrowed story is the only truth for everyone, for all time. The real story of humanity isn't found in these recycled myths. It's found in our ability to question them, to understand where they came from, and finally, to move beyond them. That's all for this one. If you appreciate this kind of evidence-based deconstruction and want to keep pulling back the curtain on the stories we're told to believe, you know what to do. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and ring that bell so you don't miss what's next. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for thinking with me. I'm Farid, and I'll see you next time.